Welcome to Nextfem Leaders, a podcast for conscious, ambitious women who want to make a real impact with their careers without losing themselves or their well-being in the process. I'm Isabel, your host, a leadership coach with over 13 years of corporate experience. I know how hard it is to lead in systems not built for us, especially if you're introvert, kind, intuitive, or spiritual. So here each week I will share tools that blend the practical and the mystical, the feminine and the masculine, so that you can lead with clarity, confidence, and authenticity. If you know in your bones you're meant for much more, you are in the right place. So let's start. Hello, beautiful women. Welcome back to this podcast and to our third episode. And before we dive into today's episode, I want to take a moment to say thank you. Truly. Thank you for the love, the messages, the shares, the reviews, and most of all for letting this space be one of honesty and connection. The response to our first episode, and especially to the last one on perfectionism, has been overwhelming in the best way, and so many of you messaged me to say that's exactly how I'm feeling or how I felt. And I believe that's the power of these conversations. When we start naming what we have been holding inside, we open the door to healing and to change. So please keep them coming, because one of the gifts of this podcast is that I can be with you in your daily life, in your commuting, your walk, your coffee break. But one of the limitations is that I don't get to see you or hear you unless you reach out to tell me. So I would like to ask you to keep having this two-way space. And now, before we go into today's topic, I have something very close to my heart to share with you. And it's that this week we are officially launching the NextFem Leadership Program. This is a 3-month journey for a group of powerful women who are ready to lead with clarity, confidence, and authenticity. So we'll go deep and we'll have weekly video teachings, bi-weekly live calls, and a community space to reflect, reconnect, and rise together. This program is everything I wish I had in my career, and I'm so proud to finally offer it in a group format. If you have been ever into one of my events or women's circles, you know the kind of magic we create when women come together, and I know this will be no different and even deeper. So the program officially begins in October, but we are opening early bird registration this month, and I will include the full link and details in the episode descriptions and show notes so you can explore if it is calling to you. And if you have followed my work, you might know that my one-to-one leadership program that is called Becoming Her is where I support women in bringing more of who they are into how they lead into their careers. And through that work, I start noticing something striking, surprising, and maybe not that surprising, but is that despite different industries, stories, backgrounds, cultures, ages, and seniority, so many of the women I coach were facing the same struggles, the same doubts, the same perfectionism, the same fear of not being enough or being too much. And while I always think it's really powerful that I tell you like you're not alone, because I have coached more than 90 women on this and I have hosted events for more than 600 women, I think it's even more powerful when you witness it, when in real time you hear it from another woman around you. When we sit in a circle of peers and think, wow, she also feels the same way I do. So I tested and I started bringing some of my one-to-one clients together to share and reflect, and the transformation that unfold has been undeniable. So it really confirmed me what I have felt in my heart for a long time, that there is a deeper kind of growth that happens in community. When we learn together, when we reflect together, and we grow together. So that's what inspired this program. That's why I'm so passionate about it. So if something you're curious, if your heart feels a little call, or your body feels like a yes, that might be for me, I would love you to explore this. And now let's dive into today's episode. So last month, I told you I was finally opening this podcast, this sacred space for us to reflect, learn, and grow together. And I ask you, what would you like to talk about here? What would you want us to explore together? And first of all, thank you again. Thank you so much for your answers, for your honesty, and for always being up for being in conversation with me. I always say that my business has been a feedback loop from day one, and I'm so grateful about it. Both my programs, my events, even this podcast, I always call it they are babies of many mothers. And again, it's something I'm so passionate about because I feel we are co-creating this space together. And what I saw in your responses was also a bit surprising, but it also makes absolutely sense. Probably 80% of what you share was related to the same topic. That was some kind of wording around how to be more myself at work. So some of you said I feel authentic in my life, but it doesn't really translate in the way I lead. Some of you say I feel like I'm wearing a mask at work. Others of you say I want to embody more myself more and I don't know how. I want to embrace my true self so that I can become more comfortable in the corporate world and be more secure. I want to know how to bring my whole self to work. So different wordings, but the same idea was coming. And there was also somebody saying I want to accept that people might not like me. So today's episode is all for you asking yourself that. And I also have to say that this is a very close to my heart topic because it's something I have struggled myself. So of course this is a topic that in my one-to-one program we work for 6 months and in the group program we will work deeply for 3 months. So it's only a little bit what I can share with you today, but I will do my best so that you get the best value of these minutes together. So at this point, I will also recommend you to find some paper and pen as I will be also guiding you through some questions that you can do yourself to start being more self at work. And to start this topic that is so close to my heart, because it's something I have honestly struggled for a long time, so I would like to share with you my story. Because I believe life is the best school and we hear tons of theory, advice, and frameworks, but I find the most powerful insights come when we actually see real life lived, messy, imperfect, and full of contradictions. And today I really feel like my work is a pure expression of who I am. And part of why I'm so passionate about doing what I do is that I want everybody to experience that at some point. But if I'm really honest with you, this wasn't always like that. I'm originally from a very small city in Uruguay. And when I got my first corporate job at 21 in the capital of Uruguay, working for one of the big 4 firms, I was super shy. I was quiet and honestly trying desperately to be perfect so nobody would notice how out of place I felt. And I worked really hard and got really good feedback. But in one of my early performances, somebody told me I was really smart, but I sounded too sweet. And they really saw potential in me, but I smiled too much, I was too calm. And they told me if I wanted to be taken seriously in the corporate world, I probably should be a bit tougher. And honestly, that feedback stayed with me way longer than I would like to admit. And for a so long time, I was so annoyed with myself for sounding in the way I sound. And I tried to change, I forced myself to sound more serious, more assertive, more corporate. But of course, that didn't go really well. You can probably guess, because I was faking it. It was not my voice. And it's funny because last week we were watching The Dropout, that is a story of Elizabeth Holmes, and she was the founder of a healthcare startup. And really, the series is about the rise and fall of her, as she's currently in jail. But she was the youngest self-made billionaire in the US. And at some point of her journey, she also starts changing her voice and starts sounding, or try to sound more like a man, actually. And if you look at her in YouTube and you find the videos of her, you can really notice how fake it sounds, because you can tell it's not her voice, and there is like kind of a pretension of sounding in a different way. And I think the problem with this is that it takes us so much energy. But coming back to my story, years later, I moved to Ireland. I was working in Dublin, and in one of my first performance reviews, I was told I was actually too direct. And they were a bit scared that people would find me aggressive, too aggressive. So I should soften a little bit my communication. And I remember at the moment looking up to the sky or to the universe, and I couldn't help but laugh. Like, is it life playing me a joke, or what is going here? Because I felt no matter where I went, somebody else would always want me to adjust who I was, how do I sound, and it was so contradictory that for some people I sounded too sweet, and then for some people I sounded too direct and too aggressive, that it really felt like a joke. And said that, I don't really blame those people for the feedback, as I know they meant really well and wanted to help me to grow. But at some point I start realizing that no matter how much I try to fit in, someone will always think I should be different. So I decided I might as well be myself. And now being yourself doesn't mean showing up in work in your pajamas. Sometimes I see these conversations going on in LinkedIn, or ignoring all professional boundaries. I think we all have roles to play. And yes, some boundaries need to be honored. But it does mean not wasting your energy pretending to be someone you're not. Like me trying to sound tough when my natural self is warm and sweet. And it means bringing more of who you really are into what you do and letting that be your superpower. So you might be asking yourself, okay, so this is a really nice story, but how do I do that? So I want to break this story into a few lessons I learned in my journey. And during that, I will also do you some questions, so keep your paper and your pen handy. So the lesson 1 that I learned from this is really owning who you are. So one day I just stopped apologizing for sounding sweet or for being sweet and caring. And I start embracing it. I start owning it. And I start owning the contradictions. Because I feel we live in a world that we are one thing or the other, and in this case we are sweet or strong. And I start really owning that I am both. And I also know so many women that are both. And start really modeling that. And maybe you're thinking, Isa, I'm not sweet and calm. I'm actually a tornado. I'm loud and wild. And that's super nice as well. So own that. Own that energy. Own your edges, your softness, your fire. You can be loud and loving. You can be quiet and powerful. You don't really have to fit into someone else's idea of leadership. We get to model our own. And when I stopped trying to sound like somebody else, actually I reclaimed my energy back because I felt more like myself than ever. And the funny thing is that once I really accept these parts of me and I embrace them together with the contradiction that it might mean for our society, I actually start sounding more assertive. And not because I was forcing it, but because I was aligned, because there was coherence in myself. And I see for some of the women in my program, is really giving themselves the space to embrace their sweetness, to embrace their empathy, to embrace their softness. And for others, they already embrace those, but it's giving themselves the space to embrace their courage, to embrace their strength, that they do have it, that it has been present in all their careers because I work with the most beautiful, smart, powerful women, but they haven't really acknowledged. So it's really claiming back, and that was part of my process as well. It was not only accepting the sweetness, but also understanding that I can do both, and I am both, and bringing both to the table so the other people also can see, modeling being sweet and strong, being calm and productive. So let's take a little pause here. Bring up your paper, and I want to write this question and reflect on this. What parts of yourself have you been hiding or changing to fit in your career? And my next question is, what will happen if you start owning those parts fully? How would that change how you show up? And of course, I would love to hear your answers, so feel free to share them with me later. But to my second lesson from my own story and from this journey into bringing myself more to work. And the second lesson is related to loving your shadows as well. When I ask myself, why did that early feedback hit me so hard? It wasn't really just about sounding sweet. It was something deeper. It was a deeper belief that I was not good enough as I was. And underneath that belief was a need to be perfect, a people-pleasing pattern, a fear of being judged or disappointing others. And I know so many women carry this as well, especially in our careers. We wanted to get it right. We wanted to be liked. We want to impress. So we overperform, overprepare, and hide our doubts. But here is the thing, usually our inner critic doesn't disappear just by ignoring it or fighting it. And mine really stopped holding me back when I start listening. When I start being curious and ask, where is this coming from? What is this part of me wanting to tell me? And I found a lot. Messages from society, old beliefs, lineage of women who had been silenced, expectations I internalized without realizing. And this is where compassion comes in. Compassion to understand where our fears come from. And as I always say, also courage to lead anyway. So now, as I shared in the last episode, the perfectionist in me, and also there is a people-pleasing part, they still show up sometimes. But I don't push them anymore. I acknowledge them, I love them, and I guide them, I lead them. So that they don't run the show and I still take the actions I want for my progress. So let's take a little pause here as well. Pick your paper, and I wanted to ask you, what fears or beliefs are holding you back? What parts of yourself have you been pushing away? Or how can you welcome those parts with compassion rather than judgment? And the last lesson I want to share with you from my own journey is learning to reframe how others see you. And here we'll talk about underestimation. Being underestimated is something that still happens to me. I would say even on a weekly basis. People often assume I'm just sweet, too spiritual, or not serious enough. And I usually realize there was an underestimation because at some point when they meet me, there's a wow. So there is a kind of an aspect of surprise. But I have come to see underestimation differently. I see it as a sign of disruption, that I'm really showing up in a way that breaks the mold. And I always say it's the cost I assume for being a change maker. And I also see it with compassion. We all have biases. And actually one of the women coming to my events, I always tell her, whenever she speaks, I'm always, wow, there's so much wisdom in that small little lady. And then in some way, there is also much surprise. There is also showing a bias. Because how many small little ladies have you seen as presidents, as writers, How many were in your history books? How many streets do we have named on women? So we're not used to. And it's something that we also have, and we also have to recognize in ourselves. So sure, a lot of people will doubt you at first. But they really trust the smart ones we see quickly, that you can be both, sweet and strong, intuitive and strategic, calm and powerful. And as I say, I have made it my mission to model that. Because the only way we will create a new type of leadership is having new leadership models, and is to live them. We won't create healthy female leadership by pretending to be something we're not, but trying to sound in a way we are not sounding. We do it by showing what is possible when we lead as our whole selves. And here again, I think it's more about bringing all the parts of us into the table. And sometimes where we are sweet and empathetic, our people pleaser doesn't allow us to bring the courage that we also have, to bring us and to speak up, to really share our doubts, So I think it's in some ways that integration, again, that comes. So let's take a pause here as well. And I want you to reflect on these 3 questions. How do you think others see you? How can you use your unique style as a form of disruption? How are you in some way a change maker? And the last one, what expectations or stereotypes could you challenge simply by being yourself? So as you know, I want to keep this episode short and no more than 20-25 minutes. So we are wrapping up, and I want to just give you a quick summary of what we talk. So 3 lessons I learned from my journey on how to be more yourself at work. First one, owning who you are, owning the contradictions, owning the different parts that come with you. Second lesson, learning to love your shadows too, learning to love those saboteurs that come in the middle of you showing authentically, your people pleaser, your perfectionism. Lesson number 3, learning to reframe how others see you and taking underestimation as the cost of being a change maker. Okay, beautiful woman, thank you so much for being here with me today. Remember, you're not alone in this at all. And I wanted to leave you with these final questions to carry with you. What are you taking from today's episode? So I would like to hear your thoughts, so message me on Instagram or LinkedIn. I'm so grateful to walk this path with you, and I will see you the next week. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you like what you heard, let me know on Instagram at NextFem Leaders, or send your thoughts and reflections to info@isabelfonseca.com. I truly would love to hear from you. And if it resonates with you, I would be so grateful if you left a review or a comment so that it helps more conscious, ambitious women to find this space. And please don't keep it for yourself. Send it to another woman you know who needs to hear this message today. See you next Monday at 8 a.m. Until then, keep leading with your truth, and remember, you already are a NextFem leader.